They were the pride of British entertainment: Adrian Clarke, the elegant film legend who embodied honor, and Elliot Reeves, the charming TV detective who stood for justice. Both adored, both untouchable until fame turned fatal. Beneath the red carpets and applause hid a web of greed, deception, and ruin that no script could disguise. When the truth surfaced, their worlds collided in the most shocking way. From luxury mansions to cold prison cells. This is the untold story of two stars who flew too close to fame's fire and fell harder than anyone imagined. Adrian Clarke was the embodiment of British elegance, the kind of actor who made every scene feel real, every character unforgettable. His rise was nothing short of spectacular. He began in small theater productions, performing in dimly lit halls for barely 50 people. But those who watched him knew they were witnessing something rare. He had a natural grace, a magnetic presence that pulled the audience in and never let go. When he finally appeared in a major period drama at the age of 29, his face became known across the country almost overnight. Awards followed, then fame, then wealth. Within a few years, Adrian Clarke was everywhere, on billboards, magazine covers, and talk shows. He was the nation's favorite actor, the symbol of charm and class. But behind that polished image was a man living on the edge. Success had come so quickly that Adrian never learned how to handle it. He told himself he was in control, but in truth, fame was controlling him. The endless attention, the pressure to stay perfect, and the fear of losing it all began to consume him. He surrounded himself with people who praised him, who agreed with everything he said, who never dared to tell him no. Slowly, the man who once acted with passion and purpose became a performer in his own life, pretending to be happy while drowning in isolation. As the years passed, Adrian's spending habits grew reckless. He bought luxury cars he never drove, mansions he barely visited, and artwork he didn't even like. Every purchase was a way to prove he was still on top, still untouchable. When movie offers slowed down, he convinced himself it was temporary. He began investing in film production and real estate, believing he could turn his fame into fortune. But he was naive about the business world. He trusted the wrong people, signed deals without reading them, and ignored warnings from those who tried to help him. The first cracks appeared when a small investment project failed. Adrian brushed it off, blaming bad luck. Then another failed, and another. Instead of pulling back, he doubled down, pouring more money into risky ventures. Soon, debts began to pile up, and the man who once earned millions found himself chasing loans and hiding bills. Still, he refused to let anyone see his desperation. The public saw only the elegant actor smiling on red carpets, never guessing that his perfect life was beginning to collapse. At night, Adrian would stare at his own reflection, struggling to recognize the man in the mirror. He had built a world of illusion, wealth that wasn't real, friends who didn't care, and a reputation that was slipping away. Every decision he made to save himself only pushed him closer to disaster. What had started as a dream was turning into a slow-motion downfall. Fame had given him everything, but it was about to take everything back. And soon, the truth he fought so hard to hide would begin to surface in ways he could never control. The first whispers about Adrian Clarke's finances began as harmless gossip, the kind of stories that floated through industry circles and disappeared as quickly as they came. But this time, the whispers stayed. Journalists started to notice strange inconsistencies in his lifestyle. Projects announced but never completed, production companies that vanished without explanation, and business partners who refused to speak about him publicly. Adrian dismissed it all as jealousy from rivals who couldn't stand to see his success. Yet deep down, he knew the walls were closing in. The deals he had made in the shadows were not as secret as he thought. It started with a small article buried in the back pages of a newspaper, suggesting that Adrian had been involved in questionable financial dealings overseas. Within days, it spread like wildfire. Online forums lit up with speculation, and entertainment blogs dug into his past with relentless energy. Then came the shocking revelation. One of his former business partners, a man named Louis Gray, had disappeared without a trace. The police began asking questions, not just about the missing man, but about the millions of pounds that seemed to have vanished with him. Adrian's carefully built image as a refined gentleman and national treasure was beginning to crumble. Reporters surrounded his mansion day and night, waiting for a statement. His management team tried to control the damage, issuing press releases filled with denial and distraction. But the truth couldn't be buried. Documents surfaced showing offshore accounts registered in Adrian's name, secret properties in foreign countries, and large transfers linked to shell companies. What looked like simple financial mismanagement was starting to resemble deliberate fraud. The media turned merciless. Every headline was an attack, every broadcast a countdown to his fall. Inside his grand home, Adrian paced the marble floors, watching the news in silence. His reflection on the television screen looked pale and distant. He had always believed that his charm could fix anything. A scandal, a rumor, a lie. But now charm wasn't enough. His friends stopped calling. Sponsors withdrew their contracts. Even the people he had helped rise in the industry pretended they didn't know him. The loneliness he had once ignored was now absolute. The final blow came when police raided his London apartment. The footage of him being escorted in handcuffs became one of the most shared images of the year. Fans who once adored him felt betrayed. Colleagues who had praised his talent now avoided mentioning his name. In a single night, Adrian Clarke, the golden face of British cinema, transformed into a symbol of greed and deception. Sitting in a cold interrogation room, he finally understood how fragile fame truly was. For years, he had convinced himself that he could bend reality to his will. But the truth had caught up to him, faster and louder than he ever imagined. And as the camera flashes faded and the headlines multiplied, Adrian realized that his story had already been rewritten. Not as a tale of glory, but as the shocking downfall of a man who had everything and lost it all. While the nation was still reeling from Adrian Clarke's scandal, another shockwave was brewing within the British entertainment industry, this time centered on Elliot Reeves, a beloved television star known for his role as a righteous detective who always caught the criminal in the final scene. To millions, he was the face of justice and morality, the kind of actor who inspired trust and admiration. His show ran for years, turning him into one of the highest-paid figures on British television. Fans lined the streets to see him film, believing he embodied the same integrity as the characters he played. But the truth behind his confident smile was far darker. Elliot had always been drawn to risk. Even during the height of his success, he chased the thrill of danger in secret. First through small bets, then through high-stakes gambling. The adrenaline made him feel alive, more powerful than the roles he performed. Soon, what began as a harmless hobby evolved into an addiction. He owed money to dangerous people and, in desperation, began using his fame to attract investors to what he described as an exclusive members club for high-end betting. Behind the glamour, it was an illegal network built on manipulation and deceit. Elliot used his celebrity status to gain trust, convincing fans and colleagues to invest large sums of money. For a while, it worked perfectly. The scheme grew fast, and so did his arrogance. He bought luxury watches, sports cars, and even a private apartment in Monaco. He was living a double life, a national hero on television and a shadowy figure in a criminal web. But as more people got involved, cracks began to show. Payments were delayed, winnings went missing, and investors started asking questions. Elliot tried to silence the noise by borrowing money from one group to pay another, but the cycle was unsustainable. When one of his business partners was arrested in a match-fixing case, the trail led directly to him. Investigators uncovered hidden bank accounts, coded messages, and financial links to illegal gambling operations across Europe. The media once again erupted with fury, drawing parallels between Adrian Clarke's fall and Elliot Reeves's unraveling. Headlines read, "Britain's beloved detective caught in real-life crime," and public trust evaporated overnight. Elliot's world collapsed just as quickly as he had built it. In a desperate attempt to escape, he booked a one-way flight to Spain under a false name. But luck, which had once been on his side, finally abandoned him. Authorities intercepted him at Heathrow Airport with thousands in unreported cash and forged documents hidden in his luggage. The arrest was swift and humiliating. Cameras captured his confused, hollow stare as officers led him away. Behind the glamour, behind the crafted smile, Elliot Reeves was exposed as another fallen idol, a man consumed by greed, gambling, and the illusion of control. The actor who once embodied justice had become the criminal he used to portray. His downfall wasn't just a personal tragedy. It was a grim reflection of how easily fame can twist truth into fiction and leave even the most celebrated faces unrecognizable when the lights finally go out. Prison was a world neither Adrian Clarke nor Elliot Reeves had ever imagined they would enter. For men who had once been adored by millions, the reality of confinement was a brutal awakening. The noise, the lack of privacy, the endless routine, it stripped away everything that once defined them. There were no scripts, no costumes, no cameras to hide behind. The audience was gone, and all that remained were two fallen stars surrounded by walls that cared nothing for fame. Adrian's first months inside were unbearable. He had always been composed and dignified, but in prison, those traits meant nothing. The other inmates saw him as fragile, even arrogant, and his polished speech made him an easy target for ridicule. He avoided confrontation, retreating into silence and observation. Nights were the hardest. The constant echo of metal doors and muffled arguments reminded him how far he had fallen. The man who once dined with directors and royalty now queued for meals under fluorescent lights, clutching a plastic tray like everyone else. Each passing day felt like a punishment beyond the sentence itself, a slow dismantling of everything he believed made him important. Elliot, on the other hand, adapted differently. He approached prison as another stage to perform on. His natural charisma drew attention quickly. He joked with guards, entertained inmates with stories from his television days, and carried himself like the star he once was. For a while it worked. People liked him, and he felt in control again. But behind the performance, his fear was growing. The late-night whispers about his crimes, the resentment from those who had lost everything because of people like him. It began to close in. No amount of charm could erase the guilt that haunted him. He lay awake at night, staring at the cracked ceiling, hearing the echo of the word fraud in his mind, like a curse he couldn't escape. Eventually, fate brought the two men together. They met in the prison library, both drawn to the silence it offered. They never spoke much, but there was an unspoken understanding between them. Each saw in the other a reflection of what they had lost: respect, freedom, purpose. In those quiet hours surrounded by dusty books, they shared the same burden of regret. Adrian began writing letters he never sent, addressing them to people he had betrayed. Elliot started reading philosophy, searching for meaning in a life that had been built on lies. As the months turned into years, their fame faded entirely. New actors rose. New scandals replaced their names in headlines, and the world outside moved on without them. Inside those walls, they were no longer celebrities, but men stripped of illusion. The glamour had died, but something else had taken root. The painful clarity of truth. They had spent their lives performing, hiding behind roles and appearances. Now, in the silence of their confinement, they were forced to face who they really were. Prison had taken their freedom, but in a strange way, it had finally given them honesty. When the gates finally opened and Adrian Clarke walked out of prison, there were no reporters waiting, no fans cheering, no flashes of cameras. The world that had once celebrated his every move had forgotten him completely. He stepped into the cold morning air with a small bag of clothes and a heart weighed down by silence. Freedom didn't feel like victory. It felt like starting from zero. He moved to a quiet village far from London, renting a small cottage by the sea. The sound of waves became his only company. Some said he was writing a book about his life. Others claimed he spent his days feeding stray cats and walking along the cliffs at dawn. Whatever the truth was, Adrian Clarke disappeared from the public eye, leaving behind a legacy that had turned into a cautionary tale. Elliot Reeves was released a year later, and his return to the outside world was far more chaotic. The moment he stepped out, journalists swarmed him with cameras, shouting questions about his crimes and debts. His former producers refused to meet him. Streaming platforms erased his shows, and his fan base turned against him. Every attempt to rebuild his career ended in humiliation. Casting directors politely declined. Sponsors ignored his calls, and talk shows wanted him only as a spectacle, not as an actor. The fame he once worshipped had become his prison now, following him everywhere he went. For a while, Elliot tried to convince himself he could make a comeback. He started a podcast about redemption and personal growth, but it failed to gain attention. People didn't want to hear lessons from a man who had deceived so many. The guilt became unbearable. Nights were sleepless, haunted by memories of the faces that trusted him. Friends who lost money, fans who felt betrayed, and his own family who had turned away in shame. The mirror became his enemy, reflecting the same confident smile that had once fooled the world. One evening, a small independent filmmaker reached out, offering Elliot a role in a low-budget film about a man seeking forgiveness after losing everything. He accepted without hesitation. The film was never widely released, but for Elliot, it was more than a job. It was a quiet confession. When he stood before the camera again, his voice cracked with emotion that didn't need to be acted. It was real. It was pain. For the first time in years, he wasn't performing a character. He was himself. Years later, a new documentary revisited both their stories. It explored how two of Britain's most admired actors had gone from fame to disgrace, and how their choices had rewritten their legacies. Viewers watched in disbelief, fascinated by how quickly the spotlight could destroy those it once blessed. Adrian was never interviewed, but a letter from him was read at the end of the film. In it, he wrote simply that the greatest punishment was not the prison walls, but the knowledge of what he had become. As the documentary ended, the final image lingered. Two men who had everything the world could offer, only to lose it through their own hands. Their lives became a stark reminder that fame without integrity is a house built on sand. It can glitter for a while, but when the tide comes in, it always washes away. Fame gave Adrian Clarke and Elliot Reeves everything: admiration, luxury, and power. Yet it also became the stage for their greatest downfall. Their stories remind us that success built on lies can't survive the weight of truth. Beneath the lights and applause, both men discovered the cost of forgetting who they truly were. What began as dreams of greatness ended as lessons in humility, showing that integrity is the only legacy that lasts beyond fame. If stories of rise and ruin fascinate you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more gripping true crime documentaries uncovering the dark side of fame.